The project for today is a gift bag that looks like a small backpack. I thought this was especially timely for a back-to-school gift for teachers. The items that I put in this one were instant coffee, flavorings for water, a gift card for a favorite coffee shop or even a wine bar if you want to go that way, and tea bags along with a post-it note. I used temporary glue dots on the flaps so that they could be opened and resealed. And the ribbon, this is just about 1/2 inch ribbon, 3/8 inch ribbon that I used out of my stash for it. It was a very fun and really very easy one to do. Of course, you can use any cardstock that you want to make the backpack out of, and whatever decorative papers you choose to use for it. The cardstock does need to be substantial in order to hold its shape and hold the items in it, but it works better if it does not have a real crisp finish to it, so that the score lines on the edges don't end up cracking and showing the often white interior of the cardstock paper. So let's go ahead and get started on this. What you're going to need is two types of cardstock. The one for the body of the bag, and also for the decoration on the front pocket. Those would be the same color. First one is cut 8 1/4 inches by 9 3/8 inches. And for the smaller flap, it is 2 1/4 inches by 1 inch. The second colored pattern of cardstock that you need, 5 3/4 inches by 3 inches. That is for the front pocket and flap on the pack. And then another piece that is 2 3/4 inches by 1 1/2 inches, which is for the design paper on the flap of the backpack itself. A little bit easier way of seeing the two different papers that I used for it is to look at this one. You have the one paper for the backpack itself, which you use for the flap on the pocket, and then the pocket, you can use that same paper for the flap on the backpack. Next, what you need is a piece of ribbon, and this ribbon is, oh good grief, it is 3/8 of an inch wide ribbon. It needs to be a little bit flexible because you're going to have to thread it through the holes. You need a minimum length of 18 inches up to 24 inches. Anything longer than 24 inches, you're just going to cut the excess off. Anything less than 18 inches, it is going to be extremely difficult to thread through the holes as you are trying to put this together. All right, let's go ahead and get started on it. First thing that you do is work with the 8 1/4 by 9 3/8. And what you do is, starting with the 8 1/4 inch at the top along the guide mark for your trimmer or score, you score it at 6 1/2 inches, and then at 1 1/2 inches. turn it then so that the 1.5 inch section is at the bottom. So you have the 9 3/8 inch edge at the top. Move it to, set it at the 9 inch mark and score. Move it to 7.5 inches. Score again to 4 1/2 inches. Score and to 3 inches. And score. What you want to do at this point is burnish all the score lines. And again, when you're looking at your paper and you see the indented score line, you want to fold away from that. The reason for that is the paper has been weakened at that point, so it is going to stretch more easily without cracking and tearing along the score line. Now, holding your paper so that you are looking at all mountain folds with this 3/8 inch tab on the right hand side, what you're going to want to do is cut this entire rectangle away. And I like to hold my paper so that the score line that I'm cutting along is just the area, the area that I'm cutting out is a better way of phrasing it, is where I can see the score line. All right, now I turned it and I didn't do it that way this time, so I ended up with a wow there. So I'll just fix it by turning it this way. Okay, now the next part is to, on this section here, this is actually the front of the backpack. And what we need to do at this point is to cut a scoop out of here, because when you thread the ribbon through the backpack to form the straps, it will actually be looping right there. And you just need to leave room for it. And then here along the bottom edge of it, this narrow strip here, cut diagonal down to the point that's formed the intersecting lines, and then trim up. What I do is I want to trim a narrow section out of there so so that it folds nicely. So I start a little bit to the edge there. Now you'll also want to trim a narrow wedge out of here, here, and here. And to do that so that I can see the score lines that I am wanting to use as guide marks, I turn the paper so that the score line is to the left-hand side of my scissors, since I am right-handed, and that ensures that I can see the score line. So for each wedge of paper, I am flipping my cardstock over. And so let's get that out of there. One more piece to go on this. Okay. Now, this is your body of the backpack. The next thing you do is to turn it upside down so that all the scores or all the folds are coming up. What you will do at this point is measure on these 1.5 inch sections, measure midway, which is 3/4 of an inch, put a mark there, and again on this one 3/4 of an inch, which is the halfway mark, put a mark there. Now you are going to want to score diagonal lines there, and to be able to see it well, I fold this 3-inch wide flap up, put the mark there and the corner there, and score there, and then using that same mark as the guiding point, and oops, and the intersection of the fold lines there. Well, darn it. Score there. Now slide it over to your next 1.5-inch wide section. Again, fold that 3-inch wide flap up. Set your pencil mark at the edge of the track and the fold line there. Score. And slide it over, pencil line to intersection of those fold lines. Score it there. What you end up with is 2 diagonal folds. They meet at the halfway point there at that 3/4 inch mark, and end down at the bottom there, down at the bottom here where the lines intersect, and again down here and down here with the meeting point is there. And now you will fold and burnish along those lines. I normally wouldn't use just 2 plain colors of cardstock for this, but I wanted to make sure that you could see the fold lines and scores that I'm making here so that you'd be able to follow along. All right, now you have this done. What you will want to do at this point is round the corners on the flap of the backpack portion. What I'm using here is a 1/2-inch corner rounder. And you will also want to round the corners on the 2 3/4 by 1.5-inch section with that same corner rounder. That is the designer portion for the flap. Now you go ahead and glue, tape, whatever your preference is for attaching the designer paper there. This was cut a 1/4 of an inch smaller than the flap, which allows you a 1/8 inch border all the way around it. Okay, now we need to get started assembling this. What we're going to do next is, oops, there it is, mark the holes to thread the ribbon through for the strap. And my preference is to punch little holes on it. I start about a 1/4 of an inch up from the bottom and a 1/4 of an inch in from the fold line. Mark a hole there and mark a hole there. And then on the flat portion of it, again, you are about a 1/4 of an inch away from the edge and starting at the midpoint, which is 1.5 inches, mark a 1/4 of an inch on side of that and a 1/4 of an inch on the other side of that. Now that I have those places marked, I take a small hole punch and punch those holes to make them large enough for the ribbon to go through. And depending on your weight of cardstock, sometimes it takes just a little bit stronger punch to get through, because on the flat portion of it, you are actually going through 3 layers of cardstock. The next thing that you'll want to do on this is thread the ribbon for the backpack. I found the hard way that if you assemble the bag first before threading it, it is virtually impossible to get it threaded through those bottom holes. So what I do is find about the mid portion of the ribbon and start it through the holes. And you know what? I just noticed that I put this decorator piece on the wrong side of the flap. My goal, oh wait a minute, no I didn't either. It is on the right side, I'm just looking at it unfinished. So do what you need to get the ribbon started through there, which can be a challenge depending on your ribbon that you're using. Then I take the other side and force it through that. Oh, come on. Now, of course, I'm having a little bit more trouble doing it since I'm trying to do this on camera. There. Let's see if I can get this. All right, now go ahead and thread it through the holes at the bottom. Okay, now you have it through there. Pull it out long enough so that you can tie a knot in your ribbon. Doesn't have to be fancy because this is the inside and bottom of the pack. And you just want to have it so that it doesn't slip out through the hole. If you're using a narrower ribbon, you may end up having to tie a double knot in it to keep it in there. Okay, now you have that folded. And at this point, you are going to glue this 3/8 inch strip or tape or whatever your preference is on it. I tend to like to use glue because it gives me a little bit more room for adjustments before it is firm. And I'm not getting enough glue on that. Let's go ahead and get my other bottle out. Hold it down until it sticks fairly well. I leave the bottom of it open for now until I get the pocket put on it. Here you can see why you cut that scoop out of that front panel. You just need to have it deep enough so that the ribbon has room to go in there. All right, the next thing that you're going to work with is the 5 3/4 by 3 inch piece of cardstock, which is for the front or the front pocket of the backpack. It's very simple, 2 score lines. The lengthwise portion of it, 1/4 inch from each edge. Then turn it and put it on the 2 inch mark. Score 2 1/4 inch. Score 4 1/4 inches, and score, and 4 1/2 inches and score. What you see here, you have a score line here, 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 and here. This section that has the two score lines closer to the end, you're going to need to do some trimming here. Trim that whole section off. Okay. Next, all you need to do is just snip at the score lines there and here. Again, take your corner rounder. This again is a 1/2 inch corner rounder, and round the corners on the section that you cut the border from. And the 2 1/4 by 1 inch piece of contrasting paper, which will be the decoration for the flap on that little pocket, round the corners on it as well. Take and glue that to your flap. Fold on your score lines and burnish them. Probably would have been easier to have folded and burnished before I glued that flap on. Get that stuck a little bit better. Now you want to assemble this little pocket. Fold it up so that you can see what the front is, and then the front flap, you want to have it on top so that you don't have the raw exposed edge on of the pocket at the right side. Put it down and hold it until it dries. Turn it over and do the same thing. Again, the flap on the front part of the pocket, you want to have it back. Fold that little bottom tab in first, the back flap down, and then the front flap. Okay, now that you have this little pocket assembled, what I like to do to attach, to be able to close the flaps, is I like to use temporary glue dots. That way the little flaps can be opened a couple of times and resealed. All right, now close the flap down on the main part of the backpack and position the pocket on it. You know, roughly centered between the edge of the flap and the bottom of the pocket. This is just strictly cosmetic. It doesn't make any difference structurally where you put it in it. I put a reasonable amount of glue on the back of the pocket so that it will stay. I'm not going to have problems with it. And the reason I left the bottom of this pack open was so that I could stick my hand in and hold this down. Again, just hold it till the glue starts to firm up on it. Next step, fold the 2 side flaps in, fold the back flap up, put glue or tape, whichever your preference is, on the front, on the back of the front flap, and hold it down. Set it down and just press in there with your bone folder or something else until it adheres well. Put a temporary glue dot on there and seal it down. Oops, see, I did not get that folded quite well enough. I did not trim enough off of that side section, so it's wanting to hold the flap up on that portion. So when you take that top rectangle off that I told you about in the very beginning of this, make sure that you are taking that score line off so that it will go together and be nice and square. All right, you now have a little gift bag that is shaped like a backpack. Use it for your children's teachers, or even put a little surprise in it for your children the first day of school. Have fun.